Hello, this is the second screencast from Chapter 9 of the textbook. Today we're going to be talking about which habitats are being lost. Last time we covered why the habitats are being lost, so now we're going to see which habitats are being lost the most. This is material on pages 260 to 268 of the textbook. So figure 9.5 of the textbook shows data for what habitats have been lost. Specifically here we're talking about by region. So we've got 4 regions: boreal, temperate, subtropics and tropics. And we've got data for the whole of year 2000 to 2015, and then by 5-year time periods. So notice that this is annual forest change in thousands of hectares. So we're talking about millions of hectares. 4,000 on minus 4,000 on this chart means a loss of 4 million hectares, for example. So if you look at this, the overall pattern here is that we have actually had a gain of natural habitats, again, especially of forests in temperate areas. And this is largely in North America and especially in Europe, where there's been a decline in farmland area, and some of that farmland is becoming reforested. In contrast, in the tropics, we have seen a continued loss of habitat over the last 15 years. But note this loss has decelerated a little bit over the last 15 years, but it's still a huge negative loss of habitat. So we're all pretty aware of where this is going on. It's places like the Amazon basin, the Amazon rainforest, shown here in figure 9.6. And you can see here the bar charts kind of show the trend that was evident in the previous. So this is in the tropics, and there was this deceleration of forest loss over the last 10-15 years. A big drop between 2004 and 2012. But it was still being lost, so we're still losing the rainforest. It's not growing at this stage. However, interestingly, that kind of trend has reversed in the Amazon. This doesn't have up-to-date information, but all the evidence over the last 2 years has pointed to a pretty rapid increase in deforestation, especially in the Brazilian Amazon, which forms more than half of the Amazon rainforest. So what we've got is a very large decrease in remnant wilderness areas. So we have really very little wilderness left on Earth. If you look at this, the wilderness areas are in green on that global map. So the Sahara Desert is a large wilderness area, the Australian parts of the Australian desert, the Amazon, and again these boreal forests of Canada and Siberia. But wilderness has pretty much been lost from the rest of the planet. You'll notice here that it highlights the Amazon and the big loss of wilderness areas that's gone on in that area for the last few years. And on the right-hand side, subplot D shows you Borneo, and there is actually information in the textbook about this, about the loss of forests on Borneo due to extensive plantations for palm oil. So this is box 9.3 on page 263. If we go back and look at the Amazon again, this is a paper that actually just came out last week. So it's looking at the Amazon and looking at mega fragments. So we're going to talk a little bit more about fragmentation in the next screencast. And this does suggest that there are some parts of the Amazon basin that are really, at this point in time, still largely unfragmented, i.e. they don't have roads and things breaking them up into smaller forest fragments. So if you look here at the areas in blue, these are some what are called mega fragments, more than 100,000 square kilometers. And these areas in blue, if you look at the figure on the right, so they are way over to the right, that means they are on the x-axis, that means they are big. And on the y-axis, the tree cover loss is relatively small in these bluer fragments. So these are the numbers that are highlighted here in this chart on the top right, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. If you go to the Amazon south of the river, though, here we have fewer of these mega fragments. They tend to be smaller, and this is where we do have larger losses of forest cover going on right now. So this is closer to the most developed areas of Brazil. And these areas, you can see here, they're given yellows and green colors, and this means that there is accelerating tree loss in those areas. Of course, we don't want to ignore what's happening in marine habitats. So it's difficult to think of habitat loss as being something that happens in marine systems, right? We still have the same area of ocean that we've always had. Of course, it's highly degraded, and we'll talk about that more through the rest of the semester. But some habitats within marine systems are getting highly fragmented. And one of the most notable of those is, of course, coral reefs. Hopefully you all know about some of the threats that coral reefs are facing. One of the principal ones is habitat bleaching, coral bleaching due to increasing water temperatures. And you can see here that the number of reefs that are threatened by bleaching is pretty extensive. It covers most parts of the world. These dots that are in red are areas with severe bleaching. And essentially what happens when you get these bleaching episodes is that you get a major die-off of the corals themselves, and then all the other animals that live in those corals. So of course, this is habitat loss, right? This is a loss of living habitat loss, and unfortunately, this is another habitat loss that is accelerating. Again, I don't want us to think that on land it's just forests that have been lost either. This is the tall grass prairie ecosystem in the United States. So some of you will live close to this area or have visited it. And this formerly stretched from Canada all the way down in an unbroken grassland, all the way down to Texas and east as far as Indiana. And as you can see, the dark green areas there are what we have left. One large block there in the middle, but otherwise just small fragments elsewhere. So this is a habitat that we've lost more than 90% of in the last 150 years. And of course, this is one of the main habitats of the North American bison. It was found in other habitats. There were, in fact, forest bison in the east. But this is where the great herds of bison migrated from north to south each fall. Figure 9.8 in the textbook shows you areas that have been converted. That's the areas in blue. On the left-hand side, this shows you this by region. And on the right-hand side, that breaks it down by different biomes. Okay, so you can see clearly here that for some regions like Europe and South Asia, more than 50% of the region has been converted to some sort of anthropogenic use. And then in some areas, the area that's currently being converted is less, but the threats of future development, that is in red, are actually much greater. So in particular, look at South America and Africa, where we're going to have rapidly growing populations over the next century. And to feed and house those populations, we're going to have to likely convert more land to developed uses. Notice also in these regions that there are various levels that are protected. So that's the gold dots. In all of these regions, it's much less than 20% or 0.2 as a proportion of areas are protected. In some areas, such as Central Asia, it's actually pretty close to zero. And remember, we talked a few weeks ago about E.O. Wilson's idea of sparing 50% of the globe for conservation. And you can see how far we would need to go to get to 50% in all of these regions. Then if we look at the right-hand chart, we've got the same here, the same breakdown. Again, you can see that some areas are facing major loss of habitat, flooded grasslands and savannas, for example. Tropical and subtropical grasslands are facing major development risk over the next few decades. So that's it for this screencast. We'll have a third screencast talking about habitat fragmentation. So go back to Moodle in your own time and watch that screencast. Thank you.